G'day and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I want to show you an extensive list of ways that you can mobilize a restricted ankle, more specifically into dorsiflexion. Truth be told, the inspiration for this video is the fact that I've had what I would call restricted ankles for 10 to 15 years. And despite trying to help people improve their ankle mobility in a range of different ways, I've never really taken the time to figure out why my ankles are stiff and then spend a lot of time trying to mobilize those restrictions to improve my overall function. And if you can hang around towards the end of the video, the last 4 or 5 exercises that I'm going to go through are a little bit left of center, but absolutely as important as the other exercises. So let me show you some interesting things. So as we talk about with any mobility exercise, it's really important that we can establish an initial baseline for you to see how effective each individual exercise that we're about to go through actually is. And obviously your pre-test can be anything, but for me, a really clear one that I like to get my patients to do is just a deep squat. And what's really great about looking at a deep squat is that by going down into the full depths of your squat and seeing what happens, you can very quickly understand how you're going and establish some initial clues as to what might be restricting you. So for example, in a perfect world, an ideal squat with ideal ankle range of motion requires us to have our feet straight and our knees out, and being able to maintain that shape all the way down to the bottom position of the squat without feeling like our feet want to turn out, our knees want to cave in, your heels want to lift, or you feel like you're going to lean forwards or fall backwards. If you notice any of those things as you reach the full depth of your squat, then that's a dead giveaway that your ankles may be more restricted than they could be. So for me, the difference between this position and this position is how much flexibility I have through those ankles. So as we work through each one of these individual exercises, I want to come back to this movement just to double check how it feels, whether it's easier for me to close that gap a little bit better than what I can currently. And I would urge you to try the same thing so that you can get an instant appreciation of which one of these exercises had the biggest impact on how your squat feels, so that you don't have to waste your time with things that you don't need to do or aren't effective for you. So the first exercise is potentially one of the most important, not only because it's really effective, but because it's often missed by so many people. And that's going after your ankle joint restriction or your capsular restrictions. We want to do a banded ankle stretch, and all that requires is for you to have a power band of some sort. You can definitely use a TheraBand or a TheraTube as well if that's all that you have lying around. But the idea is you want to fix it to something really strong, and we want to take that band and place the band below the level of your ankle bones, and then take it as far out as you can and pop it up onto a step or a block. Now, the reason for this is we want to make sure that the band is biasing the joint underneath your leg and pulling backwards and down a little bit. And what this allows us to do is as you come over the top of that, trying to close down that ankle, the band helps pull the bone back underneath, providing you a clearer path to go through. In this position, we want to make sure that you don't just let your knee come forwards and in at all. We want to make sure that your knee comes forward and out a little bit to maintain a stable foot so that we're going through that ankle restriction, not just around it. And then from here, you can hold on to the bench if you need to get a little bit more tension through there. But we want to oscillate in and out of the end of that range, allowing the band to pull that joint back, trying to find the corners that you feel are restricted and ultimately mobilize that. You can certainly spend some time in this position if it feels comfortable for you, but ideally we want to incorporate movement into this, just trying to close down that ankle to the best of your ability, asking that joint capsule to mobilize. If you can spend a minute or two in this position, then when you come out of that shape and try your deep squat again, ideally, you should feel like it's immediately a little bit lighter than what it was before. And for me, it feels like there's a little bit more range of motion through this ankle. I don't feel like my heel has to come up as much as it does on this side to allow me to get to the bottom position of that squat. But give that one a try first and let me know in the comments below how that felt for you. For exercise number 2, we want to go after some of the soft tissue that might be restricting you at the back of your leg, mainly your soleus muscle, which is the deeper calf muscle that sits further down in your leg than the more stereotypically obvious gastrocnemius muscle further up. Now, as you may know, Soleus stretches aren't super technical. The difference between a Soleus stretch and a gastroc stretch is just the position that your knee is in. So for me as a physio, I find that doing these stretches on the ground aren't anywhere near as effective as doing them off the edge of a step, because your body weight allows you to get deeper into a stretch, making it more effective than if you had your leg on the ground. So all I want you to do with this exercise is that if you can gently hang your heel off the back of the step and then bend your knee a little bit, we want to go looking from sort of right to left for which corner of this range feels like it gives you the best access to any muscular tightness down at the back of that ankle. Now, one of the things that's really important to understand for any muscular stretch that you're doing, and I've said this a lot on the channel, is that just holding this stretch for 30 seconds isn't anywhere near as effective as actively tensing that tissue in this position. If you can squeeze that tightness for 5 to 10 seconds, and again, that tightness might be all the way down the back of that leg. When you squeeze it for 5 to 10 seconds, it creates a reflex where your brain gets involved so that when you stop tensing it, that tissue will instantly give a little bit, and you should feel you can drop that heel down a little bit deeper than what you could before. Now again, if while you're doing this exercise that you feel that the tightness at the back subsides and you start to notice a bit more of a pressure or a pinching at the front of your ankle, that may mean that your underlying joint capsule is still a little bit restricted. So pair this one up with the banded ankle stretch from before to start to see where the restrictions and where that limitation tends to be. Immediately recheck that squat again to see how that makes you feel. And for me, again, I'll probably say this for every single exercise, hopefully, it just feels lighter and a bit easier to get down here than it was before. So once you spend some time stretching out that soleus muscle, obviously the sister exercise for this is your gastrocnemius stretch. Again, there's a million ways you can do it. You can have your heel behind you on a flat surface. You can have it up against a wall doing the same thing. But again, because of gravity and body weight, I find if you just keep your knee straight, drop that heel off the edge of a step, change the directions that you're twisting, make sure that you're not just in a linear position, rotate towards one side, rotate towards the other side. Spend time in the version of this stretch that hits the spots that you feel you need them to hit the most. But again, staying in this position alone isn't good enough anymore. You've got to try and squeeze that muscle, tense wherever that tightness is for 5 to 10 seconds. Again, when you give, it'll relax a little bit. You should genuinely feel like that higher part of your calf allows you to give a little bit more straight away. Again, keep repeating that process until you get sick of it or you stop making change. And then again, while this exercise addressing gastrocnemius muscle tightness may not be as specifically crucial in improving ankle mobility, it may still have a role to play in the function of your knee because it crosses the back of the knee and the function of your ankle as well. But as I said, we don't need you to guess which one of these exercises helps you the most. Do it, recheck your initial movements to see which one you feel gives you the biggest impact on your symptoms. So for exercise number 4, once you've uncovered whether there's any joint capsular restrictions and how that gastroc and soleus muscles are impacting your ankle flexibility, we can also go looking for any soft tissue at the back of the leg that might be restricted with a foam roller or a ball. It's a really simple exercise, but what we can get you to focus on is placing the roller right down at the base of your ankle because again, it's more logical that restrictions in your soft tissue closer to the stiff ankle restriction are more likely going to impact it than something further away. So if we start right at the base there, we can sort of roll from side to side again, looking for anything that feels tight, stiff, restricted, or even tender. If you need a little bit more pressure, you can put some weight through that with your other leg. But the goal of this exercise is once you've found it, we don't want you to roll up and down. That isn't anywhere near as effective as just paying attention to where it feels tight, putting some extra pressure there, and then gently bending and flexing that ankle to try and shear some of that tissue free. Again, at the end of the day, we're trying to restore a motion, a movement. So just leaving it here and hoping for the best or trying to roll up and down on a restricted area can in theory be helpful, but nothing tends to beat finding that restriction and then using movement to try and free that restriction up. And all that's required is to keep hunting up and down and around for anything that you feel is restricted, putting some pressure through it, trying to use movement to shear that free. Now, if you find that you're looking for something a little bit more brutal than this, then what we can do is something called the bone saw, popularized by American physical therapist Kelly Starrett. And what this requires you to do is to take that same ball or foam roller, and you can use a rolled up towel as well. We want to place this just below the line of your calf muscles. The further back your body weight goes, the worse this will feel. So you can have your hands in front of you to start with if you need to, looking for anything that you would consider is also a little bit stiffer, tighter, and restricted that doing this on your back didn't necessarily capture. And for me, on that left-hand side, there's a really juicy spot just there. So I just want to gently sort of work my way around that. So encourage that tissue to mobilize to the best of my ability. But always remember that if you can't take a breath here, if you feel like this is too tender for you, you can't talk to someone, you can't sort of express yourself in the way that you would want to because it feels intensely sore, then you're going too deep. We need to respect what your brain and nervous system is telling you. If it feels too tender, it's probably too hard. And it'd be well worthwhile taking some pressure off that, maybe exchanging this roller for a rolled up towel or something with a little bit more give in it. But at the very least, just finding the level that you feel comfortable with, we can put some pressure through these tissues and still feel relatively at ease. If you need to be a little bit more specific, you can get one leg out the way and you can sort of play around with the roller itself. Just hit different angles through that back of your calf. Again, trying to find anything that feels restricted and things that your soleus and gastroc stretches may not necessarily have captured, and that doing this lying on your back with the roller may also not have captured. But again, as we always say, once you've done that, if you can then practice your squat again, and for me, I feel like I'm getting really, really close to having my heels on the ground, whereas before I felt a bit higher. But after each one of these first 4 exercises, from a global perspective, it feels like it's a lot more advantageous for me, a lot easier for me to get down here. So that bone saw for me is really, really critical at getting to that deeper tissue. Lying on my back, doing that motion for me isn't quite at the level that I need it to. I need more pressure through there. I need a more brutal version of that stretch to really access some of that longer term, deeper soleus, gastrocnemius, other soft tissue restriction that just doesn't seem to go away for me when I do my general stretches with that contract relax technique. Instead of just going after the specific tissue or joint restrictions that might be there, we want you to spend time practicing the positions that you want to improve. So for me, because the bottom end of my squat does feel imperfect and it's a bit stiffer and more restricted than I would like, it's really advantageous to just get into that position, but in a way that I can tolerate and that feels comfortable. So a great way to do this, and you may see this quite a bit on the internet, is we can take the same bands that we use for the banded ankle stretch. If you can step inside that band, and we can use this as a bit of a tensioner so that when you squat down, I feel now that I'm not likely to fall back. So putting this band in a position that feels really comfortable for you, it just allows me to hang out here with less load going through my ankle joints. And the reason why this is important is I can practice my good technique of having my feet straight, driving my knees out as far as I feel comfortable. But then I can sort of work my way in and out of those end ranges by shifting my hips from side to side, trying to close down that ankle as much as I feel comfortable in a position that's functional. So spending a minute or 2 in this position, just working through the outer ranges of my ankle, closing my ankles down, not being afraid to let my heel come up, getting my tissue and my nervous system used to being in this position, especially because those first 4 exercises have given me more range than I had previously. So spending time in this position allows my brain to become more familiar with this new range, increasing the likelihood that it hangs around. So again, just working my way through, just freestyling, trying to find where and which corners feel they need the most attention. Again, making sure I'm keeping my feet straight and my knees out as much as I can, trying to be up as vertical as I can as well. Trying to prioritize good mechanics and chipping away at the end range of that ankle in a way that my body now feels a little bit more happy to do, and I can explore these ranges a little bit more safely, ultimately allowing me to spend more time in this position. And again, coming out of that with a little bit of luck, what I should then feel once again is when I squat down, that feels amazing for me at the moment. I still feel a fraction restricted, but my hips feel a little bit looser. My ankles don't feel as restricted as what they were when I did this originally. So for exercise number 6, similar to the last exercise, we want to spend some time at the end of your range playing around. If we can also focus on improving the strength of the area while working on the end ranges of your motion, it can better help our body adapt to that much quicker. So with the elevated split squat, which was popularized by Ben Patrick, the knees over toes guy, what he found was that by loading yourself up with some weight and closing your ankle down as far as you feel comfortable, strengthening your tissue through its full range of motion can lead to improvements in that range of motion. So what you need to do for an elevated split squat is by having your back leg straight and your front leg straight, keeping your heel down, we essentially want to keep your trunk vertical and try and bring your hip towards your calf as far as you feel comfortable before allowing that heel to come up. Now, obviously, the depth of range that you have will be based on your balance and your inherent flexibility to this shape. But adding load on top of this is a great way to strengthen your tissue, but also try and work the outer corners of your range at the same time. So doing a couple of sets of 10 to 15 in this position, making sure that you not only just complete the exercise, but you're exploring the depths of that end range every single time you do this, can again be another fantastic additional way to improve your ankle flexibility while becoming stronger at the same time. But one of the reasons why I love this exercise is if your leg is behind you with your foot straight as well, it also opens up your back leg. And as you've seen on the channel a lot, a lack of hip extension or tightness through the front of our hips is one of the single biggest issues that we face in the modern world, thanks to all the sitting that we tend to do. So again, you can start with your foot up on something, just go down as deep as you feel comfortable, making sure that you pay attention to closing down that ankle as far as you feel comfortable. As this gets easier, you can grab a weight, have a weight on your back to make this a little bit harder. So again, you're not only working on your ankle dorsiflexion range of motion, but the strength of the entire system as well. So exercise number 7 is taking that ball of yours once again and going looking for some tightness through the tibialis posterior muscle that sits on the inside of your shin, crosses behind the ankle bone and the ankle joint, and then works its way down towards the arch of your foot. So you would have seen this on the channel a little bit, but one of the great ways to do this is to cross your legs or to be sitting down in a way that you can get access to this part of your leg. I'm going to take the ball just behind the shin bone. We can start on the top third of your calf to begin with. I'm going to put the ball in there, go hunting around for anything that feels stiff, tight, restricted, or tender. You won't have to look pretty hard to find it. It'll be relatively obvious. And then once you've found that, what we want to get you to do is pin that tissue down and then bend and flex your ankle to again shear free that tissue. Now you might find when you were sitting on your back before using the foam roller, you may be able to capture some of this tissue if you roll your leg inwards, but getting your ball into this area is an amazing way to find very specific and sometimes hard to reach tissue, and then compressing that tissue and trying to use movement to shear that free. Then again, if it's restricting that dorsiflexion range of motion, you should notice very quickly that that range of motion improves straight away. And then you just want to work your way up and down all the way to the base of that ankle bone. The lower down you go, the less you'll be hitting the muscular tissue. It'll be more tendinous tissue. But either way, anything that feels restricted to you is fair game. And just keep working through that tissue until you feel it becomes less restricted. And then when you stand up once again, you can see what effect, if any, that has had on your ankle mobility. So logically, if you spend some time freeing up some of the tissue on the inside of your leg, we can also go looking for anything on the outside of your leg as well. And these peroneal muscles, similar to the tib post muscle, run down the outside of your shin, go behind the line of the ankle itself, cross the ankle joint, and work their way down into your foot. So same rules apply. On the outside, place your ball in there. Again, go hunting around for anything that feels a little bit tight and tender. It shouldn't be too hard to find. Once you've found it, leave the ball there, and then again, gently try and bend and flex that foot as best as you feel comfortable. Now with this one, because of the way that the ankle actually moves, instead of just bending it up and down, you may also want to try and turn your foot away at the same time to stretch that tissue out. But ultimately, you're just hunting around for anything and everything that feels restricted and trying to use some movement there to shear that tissue free. So these next few exercises are personal favorites of mine because they're not the ones that you would intuitively go to try and improve your ankle mobility. But with these ones more specifically, I want you to do your test and retest before and afterwards just to see if it surprises you of how much of an impact restrictions in these areas might have on your ankle dorsiflexion. So the first place to start at exercise number 9 is trying to find restrictions in the tissue at the front of your leg and ankle. Now I love this because intuitively we often think that anything at the back of the leg being restricted can logically stop your foot and ankle from bending. But what I find clinically is if you also have some restrictions to the tissue at the front of that ankle, whether that's your tibialis anterior or any other tissue at the front, it can actually stop your ankle from closing down. So not only do we want everything at the back to be free to allow it to open up, but if you're running into some restrictions at the front, then you can't express full range of motion in that direction either. So similar to the previous 2 exercises, we can take that same ball, we can place the ball into the outside of that shin, which is where a lot of this tissue sits, and similar to the bone saw, we can very gently have the ball pressing into that part, and we're going to go looking for anything that feels tight and restricted. Again, the lower down that restriction is towards your ankle, logically and mechanically, the more likely it is to affect your ankle range of motion. So here, because it can be a little bit tender, you sort of need to roll onto the outside a little bit. You've got a few options. If it is quite tender, we can tense the muscle underneath the ball here, hold it for 5 to 10 seconds again. When you relax, it creates that same reflex we went through before. It should give a little bit, it should relax a little bit instantly. Then you might find you can put a bit more pressure through it, repeat that process again, and then when it relaxes, you'll be able to go further. The other way that you can do this is if you have your knee on the ground and have your foot free, once you've found something that feels a little bit tight and restricted again, same thing as we did with the previous 2 exercises, pin that down and very gently try and bend and flex that foot in a way that you feel shears that tissue free, ultimately making it feel a little bit easier and a little bit nicer than it did before. And then, like I said before, once you spend some time looking through all of that tissue and trying to rid yourself of that tightness, automatically drop down into that squat again. And for me, it doesn't feel like it's jamming up at the front as much as what it was before. I feel like it's a more pleasant experience. Even though I'm not probably dropping my heel down any further, it just feels a little less restricted and a little bit more mobile, a little bit lighter, if you will, than it did before. But give that one a go, and then let me know in the comments below how that made your ankle feel, and whether you felt like it improved that ankle dorsiflexion straight away. Exercise number 10 requires you to get your hand on some Voodoo floss. If you don't have Voodoo floss, you can certainly use any of the flatter therabands to do the same thing. And what this requires you to do is, if you can wrap up your ankle at about 50% stretch each time and overlapping the band by about half each time, what you should find is that by adding some elastic compression, some strong elastic compression, and then taking your ankle through full normal range of motion, we can get a really deep shearing stress that goes through your ankle that you just can't replicate with other exercises. And the really good thing about this is, if there is some chronic swelling, if you have some residual dysfunction from a previous ankle injury or an ankle sprain or a calf issue or something like that, then you might find that that congestion can also be a limiting factor to you expressing full ankle dorsiflexion range of motion. But the idea with Voodoo floss, and it doesn't have to look too pretty, is that if you wrap the ankle joint up as tight as you feel comfortable, not tight enough that you feel like the blood disappears from your toes, you should still have that capillary refill. When you give it a bit of a squeeze, the blood should return. It shouldn't tingle. It shouldn't feel uncomfortable in any way. It should just feel like a very strong elastic compression. And then what you want to do with this is you want to try and take that ankle through full range of motion, whether that be walking, just trying to walk and express that range as possible. You can do the same thing we did before with your sort of deep squats, just trying to close that down as far as you feel you can. This is a great one to add to the banded ankle stretch as well, because it does add a little bit more to the exercise than just doing the banded ankle stretch on its own. But the idea is that you want to close this down as much as you can in all directions. Again, trying to shear free anything that might be limiting that. The other great thing that this may do is that that deeper compression can really help shear free some of those soft tissue restrictions, whether it's fascia, muscular tissue, whatever it might be. Then using some Voodoo floss to try and shear some of that free can be an amazingly advantageous exercise for you to try. So once you've done that for about 2 to 3 minutes, you don't need to do it for too long, just take it straight off again. And what will happen is, as soon as you take the tension off again, you'll get this sudden refill of all this sort of blood flow to that ankle. But more importantly, as always, once you've done that, the reason why they call it Voodoo floss is you may not feel like you're actually doing anything, but then when you take it off and express the same range of motion that you did before, it should feel a little bit like magic. It should feel like there's more range of motion. It should feel lighter. If there's any chronic congestion in there as well, you should also feel like it looks a little bit less congested than it did straight away. This one is a real favorite of mine for a lot of acute issues that we deal with. It's so effective at flushing out a lot of that congestion, but you also get that little bonus of improved range of motion as well. If there's anything soft tissue that's restricted there that potentially doesn't have to be. With this exercise, we're actually going to go looking for some of the restrictions of your skin at the base of your ankle. Now, I understand that can sound quite strange, but what should happen is that when you bend your ankle back, the skin around your heel should be relatively loose and not impeded in any way. If you were to bend your wrist back and rub your finger across the skin at the back of your wrist, you'll notice that if you go in all directions, there's a lot of slack in that system. You can pinch a bit of the skin, but ultimately you can roll that skin in all directions at every point along your hand, your arm, your wrist, and most of your leg. But for a lot of people, because we get around in a lot of footwear that encapsulates the back of our heel, when we add heat and pressure, we can start to create a bit of a laminate effect through the layers of tissue at the back of that heel. And what you may notice on yourself is that if you point your toes away and then rub through the skin all the way around your foot, you may notice that under your foot's relatively supple, the tissue around your toes is pretty good, around your ankle bone is pretty good, but when you come back towards the heel, all of a sudden underneath that Achilles or towards either side of that calcaneus bone, that heel bone, it may suddenly feel like it doesn't slide around as easily as it could. And that's really important because when you close those ankles down, you need that skin to slide around in that area, again, to allow you to express normal range of motion. But if you've got that laminate effect from the pressure from the heel of a shoe, and it essentially creates this exoskeleton, this skin exoskeleton of restriction, it can be something that can legitimately restrict your ability to express normal dorsiflexion range of motion. So one of the things we can get you to do is, if you have a ball, starting with your thumb, if you bend your foot back as far as you feel comfortable and tension up that position, just slide your thumbs around looking for anything that feels a little bit restricted, and then just try and find a way to shear that tissue free. And one of the other strategies that we can apply is, if you have a ball that is a little bit rubbery, so there's a little bit of grip there, what you can essentially do is that you can apply some pressure from that ball, wind it up a little bit so you try and sort of capture some of that tissue, similar to what you would do if you were winding up a shirt. If you can wind it up with a little bit of a grip and then give it a little bit of a whack, we can take up the slack of that tension, give it a bit of a slap to try and shear that free, and then whack through that ball to try and clear some of that restriction. Now, you've got to give props to Callie Starrett. Again, I mentioned him a lot on the channel, but he's an amazingly gifted physical therapist from America who has innovated and pioneered a lot of the things and the thinking that we just didn't have before he came to be. And this sort of sliding surface dysfunction isn't necessarily something that you'll see a lot, but it's something that genuinely restricts people. This might be one of those things for you. So ultimately, wind up that tissue, give it a bit of a slap to try and shear that free. Work your way all the way around the front, the back, and the side. And then again, you don't need to trust me. We need to base this on results. When you then squat down again straight away, for me, it just instantly feels a little less restricted at the back of my heel than it did before. So that's another one where I want you to let me know in the comments down below, what effect did that have on your ankle range of motion, and how unexpected or expected was that for you? So the 12th exercise is another one that you probably haven't tried, but you absolutely should. And what that is looking after the mobility of the head of your fibula down at the base of your ankle. Now, this may sound strange, but if you're someone who has had any form of lateral ankle sprain, we've been out of action for a while, the head of that fibula, which is a joint in its own right as it anchors onto the side of your ankle, can itself become stiff, tight, and restricted. And essentially what should happen is, when you express that dorsiflexion range of motion, that head of the fibula needs to move out the way for your shin bone to plow through. But if you've experienced a bunch of stiffness and tightness in your ankle over the years, whether that be from injuries or not, that joint can become limited in a way that blocks your ability to express that dorsiflexion range of motion. So one of the things that I found really helpful is we can go after a mobility technique that tries to mobilize that restriction. And truth be told, this exercise for me was a revelation. It was the single biggest and best exercise that I've done that instantly changed my specific stiffness that I just hadn't addressed for forever. I spent so much time doing a lot of the other exercises that I didn't actually go looking for this in myself. And once I found it, it was like a light bulb that went off. But having done the retest of this experience, I now know that this is a crucial part of my ankle mobility restrictions. So what we want to do is we want to place your foot up onto a bench or a table, close that ankle down as far as you feel comfortable. And because we want that head of the fibula to translate backwards, we can sort of rotate you and put some pressure through that as you start to mobilize into that end range. Now, for me as a physio, I can dig my fingers into the front of that bone and try and create some pressure on that bone in this end range dorsiflex position and try and oscillate down through that area. So I'm trying to put some pressure in there and gently try and shear that tissue free. And you might find it's a bit of a springy joint where there's a little bit of tension for me around the back. But at the end of that range, and then trying to rotate my ankle, put some pressure down through that bone as well, genuinely took away one of the main restrictions that I've been feeling for so long. And to retest this again on myself, if I take a step back again and then squat down, I don't feel like I'm running into some of that lateral ankle restriction that I didn't realize was my restriction. So I'm very, very keen to hear for you. If you can have your foot up on that position, close the ankle down, take a bit of slack out of the joint by twisting it first, and then try and put some pressure through that lateral malleolus to the point where you feel like there's a bit of a springiness attached to that. Then immediately recheck it and let me know in the comments down below how that went for you. So once you spend some time working through every one of those 12 exercises and you've come to a problem list of things that you say, my ankle joint is a little bit stiffer, maybe the sliding surfaces, or maybe that head of the fibula was the issue that I didn't realize that I had, all of that can be for nothing if we don't talk about the footwear that you wear day to day. And the reason why I say that is if you've worked really hard to figure out what the limiting factor has been all along to your lack of ankle range of motion or ankle dorsiflexion range of motion, there always has to be a reason for everything. There has to be a reason why you've lost that range of motion. And for most people in this modern world of ours, one of the major reasons why we tend to lose our ankle flexibility in the form of ankle dorsiflexion are shoes that have a heel at the back of them. The size of the heel that you have on your shoe relative to the front is the exact amount of ankle range you do not get access to while you're in that shoe. And like anything, if you don't use that deeper range of motion deliberately with some deep squats or things like that, then you will lose that range of motion over time if you don't tell your brain and nervous system that you value that range. So while working through your ankle mobility, working through your soft tissue restrictions, spending time in those shapes, doing all the fancy and nuanced things that we've spoken about so far, you will have to keep doing those to some degree if you don't work out how you can eventually go from a heeled built-up shoe to a flat minimalist shoe at some stage. Because I don't want you to go straight into a flat shoe straight away. You've got to cultivate or recultivate the mechanics required to tolerate being barefoot, which is ultimately normal. If you jump too far too soon without having spent some time freeing up those restrictions, then again, you might expose something in a way that your body isn't quite ready for, and you might develop some other issues like Achilles pain or foot pain or shin splints or some knee pain or something like that. But it's not a mobility video if we don't try and talk about why you've lost that mobility in the first place. And those heeled shoes are often an issue that's hidden in plain sight, where just a small shift in perspective can really help you open up a whole range of better perspectives that you wouldn't have had if we didn't have these conversations. So with that being said, I genuinely hope that those exercises were helpful. I really enjoyed going through this process myself, doing each one of these exercises myself, and ultimately understanding which aspect of each part of those exercises was the most beneficial to me. But ultimately it was that subtle hidden restriction that I'd had for a long time that I didn't realize that has allowed me to start to mobilize my ankles more effectively. So as I've said all along, please let me know in the comments down below which one of those exercises gave you the best results that you were looking for. Please consider leaving a like on the channel and subscribing if you did enjoy this content and you want more of this from me. It's a great help to me and the channel. If you're dealing with any persistent issues and you need some help, please consider booking in an online consultation with me. The link's in the description below. But as always, I genuinely and sincerely hope that was helpful in some way, and I hope to see you next time.